Hello everyone, and welcome back. Oh, it's been a while. It has been a while indeed. Hi, Zewison. Oh man, how long has it been? Almost a month. Yeah, no, probably a month. Yeah, I've been off streaming for, as I said, about a month. Beginning of July, I had my uh, wedding anniversary, and then it was alpha release time for GNOME, and then there was Guadec, and then there was the heat wave in the UK, and I can basically stay in my home office where I usually stream. So it was essentially impossible for me to actually stream like usual. So I had to take a break. I actually hope to remember how this entire thing works because I honestly haven't done it for a month. Oh. Yeah, I was able to do the release of the deep dive into GNOME videos at the end of June, which was good. Yeah, the second, third parts didn't do as well as I thought they would have, but still, um, a few more than a few people have seen it, and like many of the videos that I upload, the VODs that I upload, they are usually more of a long tail kind of content. So, oh, but yeah, hopefully people will enjoy actually watching me explain how GObject works in the future. I know that it's usually a problem with the documentation in GTK and GNOME. People are looking for foundational text and they get like complicated, well, not complicated, but they get long tutorials, and maybe they enjoy something going at a different pace. I don't know, maybe not, who knows. I mean, we're still trying stuff out. But I do hope that people will enjoy uh, the new developer documentation website and everything else with it. So I'm trying to get more content on it as well. I have also seen that people have been taking screenshots of Amberl on the social media. It's always nice to see that. Oh. And we are actually close to the beta release for GNOME 43, which is going to be also an interesting milestone. Hopefully, it will be a little bit better than the alpha release, which got delayed by about a week because everything broke. It's kind of funny if you're not in the release team channel, or if you're not involved with the release process of GNOME, sometimes it can feel a little opaque, because it's building an entire like platform, so not everyone is pretty much concentrating on their own projects, so they miss out on the larger kind of picture. But if you're inside the release team channel, you will notice that it's a lot of work, and stuff happens and stuff breaks in a bajillion ways, and it's so on one side it's so funny to watch, funny in the sense, not funny of as in taking like the piss out of people, but it's funny in the sense that stuff breaks in ways that you don't expect. And then it's also super interesting because it shows how complicated software development really is if you're not used to it. If you're used to only your project, like a Leaf project, like an application, it gets really interesting really fast once you start scaling stuff up to, I don't know, 20 applications or a ton of libraries that constitute the middle layer of your operating system. And then on top of that, you put applications or like desktop environment configuration things. So it's a lot of projects that have to come together in a very precise way, and it's hard to appreciate how complicated that can be. Unless, of course, you are watching it happen live. People screaming. Stuff that breaks and you have no idea why. I mean, I used to do kind of that, the integration job as part of GNOME Continuous, which was the project that existed before we had GitLab and before we had full CI pipelines and an entire build system devoted to taking every single project in GNOME and then building it and then generating a virtual machine image for people to test it. We had that in 2012, actually. And in like for the first couple of years, the author of this project and who is also the author of OS3 worked on that particular side of things, but then he had to move on to other things like maintaining actual OS3. And then I picked it up in 2016 and basically tried to make everything build in GNOME when building from the master branch. And again, this was before per project CI pipelines. So before GitLab, before everything else. And it was such a struggle. You have no idea. People just pushed random stuff to the main branch. In some cases, it built on the maintainer's machine. In some cases, you have to wonder, did it actually build? Did it actually work at all? So you have the main development branch and you just push stuff to it? It was such a pain. Such a pain. But then we got GitLab, we got per project CI pipeline. Stuff is supposed to actually build at the very least before getting merged into the main development branch. And then we have the complete CI pipeline for GNOME, that is GNOME build meta. So things have gotten better. They are not the best, but they have gotten better. it's been a while since the meme of GNOME developers just committing stuff at random to CVS because they are acid trip casualties, which was a thing in the past, like 20 years ago. As opposed to the German precision of KDE, where everyone like commits and everything builds, and then the release is just pressing a button because everything is always perfect. It was a fun. There was a reflection of what GNOME used to be like late 90s, back when both KDE and GNOME projects were started. It was fun. Oh, and yeah, no, things these days I've gotten really better at basically everything. The idea that stuff gets built automatically has improved our practices a lot, to the point that now we are trying to basically get rid of the releases as not getting rid of releases, getting rid of the requirement of making a release archive as part of the release process. So hopefully that will come to pass, because if we can automate most of the release process and take humans out of the loop, so having the machines just take a git tag and then build a release archive and run the CI pipeline and everything else that gets done like by the machine, then we are gonna make our lives a little bit easier. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess. It's always going to be a mess. That's the most complicated bit of being a GNOME maintainer these days. Still, it's building a release archive and then having access to the download server where you can put stuff into for the mirrors to pick it up and be able to download them. It's not great. Let me double check one thing though. Sorry. Yeah, it's still summer here in London and it's still pretty warm. In my office there are 27 degrees right now and it's sweltering. Also because I have a desktop PC and desktop is overeating everything. So, what I was planning to do today. I know that the stream title is still saying writing Amberol. I'm probably not going to be working on Amberol today. I haven't been doing much work on Amberol as of late, mostly because it's still... I have a couple of branches in play that I want to work on. Though there have been contributions from Amberol users that are very much appreciated. I have a merge request for replay gain, for adding replay gain to Amberol, which is great. basically it means being able to read information from the track itself as to how much the volume should be set at, because some audiophiles and some albums will define the optimal volume to be used per track or per album, and that information is kind of useful. So GStreamer already reads it, but the idea is being able to set it if you want to control it from the UI. So you basically just say, let the track or let the album dictate the volume if it that information is available. Otherwise, no, use my own volume. And there's another merge request that I need to properly review, but I need to test it first. It's merge request for fuzzy searching inside the playlist. So you don't have to, right now searching uses exact substrings for the artist name, the album name, and the title name, the track title name. And there is a merge request that adds fuzzy searching, so you don't have to do exact substring matching, which is pretty cool. So I have to review that, but I also need to test it because it changes some of the ways the data is stored, the playlist data is stored. It adds more wrapper models because it has a custom filter and so on and so forth, a custom sorter as well. So I need to test it properly. So it doesn't, I know that it won't introduce regressions in the existing code. But today I will probably instead be working on a little bit of documentation. Actually, I'm going back to the developer documentation website. So let me actually edit the stream info. Right. So I will be working on writing the tutorial for using widget templates today, because it's something that people have expressed like interest in on the main GTK development channel, mostly because the current documentation is how do I say it? It's not a real tutorial. It's a description of how the templates feature works and how templates work inside GTK, but it's not really a tutorial because it's part of the API reference. And we have a bunch of other things that are basically predicated on the knowledge of how this stuff works. So you already have to know enough in order to understand what the documentation says. And yeah, hopefully will be useful for other people. I want to add this to the developer documentation website. So let's move to my desktop. Oh, OBS, why are you doing something stupid like that? Let me check. I had to tweak the scene a little bit. Okay, now it seems to be working. So we're back on the usual GNOME builder, and I'm gonna open the developer documentation website. I've still here, scratch. Oh, right. Yeah, some stuff has happened in the past, I'd say, couple of months for the GNOME developer website. I haven't streamed a lot on this, mostly because I was waiting for other people to like to start contributing to the website. It's always, I don't want to be the only responsible for the entirety of the developer documentation for GNOME. It's insane. I would burn out. It wouldn't be great for people actually using it, and it runs counter to the entire effort. I've tried to make contributing to documentation a little bit easier, and to make the documentation website a little bit more consistent so that other people could jump in and contribute instead of without having to understand how the entire thing is put together. It's just literally write a restructured text file and then open a merge request. And for the most part, this hasn't really worked out that well. Not many people have taken the bait. But I've had contributions. One of them, let me, sorry about that. Right. Right. So, yeah, the latest change was the addition of a new tutorial, which was the drag and drop tutorial, which currently only covers drop, not the drag bit, but the drop part is usually what people care the most about. Because people want to usually add their add the ability to drop files onto their applications, for instance. And this example is pretty much how you do it. And it was contributed by a new contributor. So it actually worked out the way I intended it. And it came with C code example and Python code example, and I had to go through a couple of iterations in terms of like review and like a couple of fixes here and there, but for the most part it worked precisely the way I envisioned the developer documentation website to work, which is people look at the content, realize that something is missing, and they contribute a new tutorial. That was great. Oh, hi, Georges. Bruh. Welcome, welcome. Yeah. Yeah, the keenest eyed of you will have noticed that I'm also writing a model view controller tutorial that is basically the text version of the MVC example that I did for the deep dive into GObject, the third part video of my deep dive into GObject. The temperature lower enough to permit human bodies to exist there? Yeah. It went. We're still 10 degrees lower than that. Yeah, in my in my office currently the temperature is 27 degrees. So I can actually work in my home office. I literally couldn't during the day. I had to take my laptop and work from the couch downstairs in my living room, which isn't great. It's really not great. But yeah, I definitely could not stream at all. It was so hot and humid. It was not fun. So I had to basically just suspend any activity during the day. Yeah, during the week of the heat wave, I was, if you saw me on Matrix or anything during the day for like UK time, it was either in the early morning UK time or I was on my phone. And I was downstairs basically drinking ice in order to keep a temperature like under control. My partner at the very least has like a portable air conditioning unit, but they couldn't literally use it to lower the temperature. They could only use it to keep it stable-ish. It would not go below 30 degrees, like Celsius. It would just not do anything. Was pretty terrible. Yeah, not fun at all. Not fun at all. Oh. Cough, cough. Oh. Anyway, right. So, drag and drop. It's done. Let's switch to widget template tutorials. So what I'm planning to do is essentially explain how to create a widget template, when you should be creating a widget template, what are the basics of creating a widget template, and also when what you have to do once you create a widget template in order to make it as idiomatic as possible. But also, like, there are a couple of, not gotchas, but there are a couple of requirements here and there. You cannot always subclass a widget, for instance. You have to subclass widget and then pack stuff into it. You can do stuff in the UI definition file, but you also have to do stuff inside the actual source code. So it's not like super immediate what you have to do. You have to remove the children yourself if you are deriving from GTK widget, and so on and so forth. So having a tutorial on the documentation website is a lot better than just gleaning information out of the API reference, because then you can describe what you're trying to achieve and try to follow along. It's what in the past I would have done under the wiki, under the how do I like section. And since the how do I like approach was moved into the developer documentation website, this is kind of the obvious thing to do. So we create a new file here and we call it widget templates. Ah, come on, templates. And then we go into the tutorials page here. This is kind of a bit of the annoying stuff. Right now, the tutorials are kind of a grab bag of stuff. The beginner's tutorials is, of course, at the very top, but there are a bunch of things here and there that are not really sorted. Yeah, action menus, for instance, here, writing a search provider, pre and post conditions, main context using lists, threading and asynchronous programming, and then we have drag and drop and widget templates. It's kind of hard to capture a hierarchy here, because some of this stuff is definitely geared towards the generic non-GUI kind of stuff. So main context using lists, threading and asynchronous programming. But asynchronous programming is already kind of pushing you towards GUIs because GTK does not allow you to use its API outside of the main thread. So asynchronous programming is what you would actually follow if you want to understand how to do async IO, for instance, inside of GTK applications. Yeah, there are a bunch of stuff. There are a bunch of things here and there. Hi, Foyele. Hello, do new tutorials get announced on TWIG? That is actually a good point. I should announce the drag and drop tutorial on TWIG. On this week in GNOME. I'll do that. I merged a new tutorial like yesterday, so I completely forgot. It was also late at night, so I'll announce it today. I'll send a note to the the bot on the This Week in GNOME Matrix channel. That was a good point. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, I actually want to see more stuff about GTK and about the documentation website and everything else inside This Week in GNOME. There's also Sonny, the author maintainer of Workbench, that is working on porting the code examples inside the Getting Started tutorial to JavaScript as well. Which is great because more people, more examples in different languages are very helpful for people that are trying to start out with GNOME. And one thing that I've done, but I haven't been able to move it to the documentation team like workspace on GitLab. I need to ask permission to do that. I took the Getting Started tutorial for Python and I isolated every single lesson into a separate commit, and now it's in a code repository that you can look at as an actual project. So it's right now it's in my workspace. There you go. So right now is in my personal workspace on GitLab. but it's there you go. But basically, the way that I wrote it is that the where are you? Every single commit inside the project is a separate lesson inside the tutorial, so you can see the diff of what changed. So you can follow along with the tutorial itself. And this is the time-consuming and hard part of writing like the tutorial. Not just writing tutorial, but the ancillary materials for the tutorial. It's the hard part here, because you have to deal with all of this. Basically do a reverse engineering and a git rebase of documentation on top of code. Which is also why it appears only, it appeared only now. But yeah, as soon as I can move it under the documentation team namespace on GitLab, it will be announced on This Week in GNOME as well. Then I also have to add the C version of that. And we'll see what happens with the Vala version as well. Hi, Andre. Welcome. So, back to widget templates. Right, so I have to move the mic out of the way so I can actually type. Yeah, let's see. Describe UIs using definition files and the GTK builder API. I need to link GTK builder. Avoid no, not to avoid. Avoid is a little bit bad. Hi, Martinez. You will need to create a builder object instance and load the UI definition XML file, extract the objects generated, and store references to them inside your own types and labels. To avoid and to automate this work, GTK also provides templates. Not like this. Let's just say this. A way to automatically load the UI definition for widget type bind the objects described in the XML into the fields in the widget instance, and automatically manage their lifetime. So yeah, this is kind of a description of what a widget template actually is. It's not, strictly speaking, only for widgets, but it's mainly I mean, when I say you bind an object described into XML, I refer to both widgets and actually objects. Anything can be anything that is not anything that is a GObject can be described into a GTK builder XML file. But the templating only applies to GTK widget, because GTK widget contains all the logic to deal with all this stuff. It's the lowest level type that sits above GObject that can do this. If we ever added serialization to GObject itself, we might end up adding some stuff that is similar to this. But in general, yeah, only widgets can have templates, but inside a template, anything that is an object can be defined. Okay. Yeah, let's add a note about this. Try definitions and describe any object type that inherits from GObject. Only widgets can have templates, but templates contain any object. Right. So yeah, this is pretty much a basic description. Templates are bound to a type and are loaded whenever a new instance of that type is created. Yeah, that is a decent introduction to what widget template actually is. Let's go back to chat. Oh, where are you? Come here, you little shit. Okay. I don't know if it's a regression of Mother or if it's a regression of Firefox, but it doesn't show the resizing indicators anymore. I have to guess. This is really weird. It started doing that. It's still on X. I'm still on X, so it might be a regression on X. Might be entirely on X's side, or it can be a Firefox regression because, you know, those happen, especially on Linux. Okay. Yeah, this is the basic definition inside the API, the GTK API reference. So exposes some facility to automate the procedure of creating composite widgets using templates. It's kind of meh. It's not great in terms of a definition. It's, yeah, it could be better. To create composite widgets with GTK Builder XML, one must associate the interface description with the widget class at class initialization time using GTK widget class set template. The interface description semantics expected in composite templates descriptions is slightly different from regular GTK Builder XML, which is not true. I mean, yeah, instead of having like an object here, you have a template. Everything else is exactly the same. So, unlike regular interface description, GTK widget class template and expect template tags, direct child of a top-level interface tag. Template tag here. Optionally, parent attribute might be specified to specify the direct parent type of the widget type. Design ignored by GTK Builder, but required for UI design tools like Glade. For GTK 4, we should really remove any mention of Glade. Otherwise, people will assume that Glade actually works with GTK 4. Flat by Firefox, I'm having the same issue, but I think the RPM Firefox. Yeah, it's flat by Firefox. Now that I mention it. So, yeah, I guess that is the problem. Who knows? Right. The XML which is contained inside template behaves as via the object definition. You may set properties on a widget by setting property tags in template tags, and also add child tags to add children and extend the widget in normal way with the object tags. So we have an entire paragraph about how template is different, but is actually the same. Yeah, this entire thing should just go. This is kind of important, and we spent a ton of time here explaining how everything is exactly the same, but then we also have additionally object tags can also God, I wrote this. I'm pretty sure I wrote this because it starts with additionally, and it's something that I tend to do. Object tags can also be added before and after the initial template tag in the normal way. In the normal way? What the fuck does that mean? Allowing one to define auxiliary objects which might be referenced by other widgets declared inside as children of the template tag. That is that is bad. That is bad on so many levels. It's really bad English, first and foremost, and then it's completely weird. And then the example, of course, doesn't actually use anything here, but yeah, that's fine. Typically, you place the template fragment to the file is bundled with your project using GResource, which is correct. In order to load the template, you need to call widget class set template from resource from the class initialization of your GTK widget type. We already said that here, but we use the set template. Yeah. Why we are repeating ourselves? You also need to call GTK widget init template from the instance initialization function, which is correct. And this is new in GTK 4.8, as well as calling GTK widget dispose template from the dispose function. Yeah, I added this to the API because it was tiresome to tell people, oh yeah, if you are subclassing from GTK widget, then you have to override dispose function, and instead dispose function you have to unparent every direct child you have. Because, you know, yeah, now there is a method that does it for you. The main problem is that some language bindings will not allow this. Cough cough Python cough cough. That was the least subtle cough cough I've ever done. But yeah, you can access widgets defined in template using GTK widget get template child. Okay, but you will typically declare a pointer in the instance private data structure of your type. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes and no. In the instance data structure for a final type and the private data structure for a derivable type. But yeah, in this case, it's perfect fine. And also, I just noticed that I modified this example to use GTK widget dispose template, and then I realized this type is deriving from GTK box, and GTK box doesn't need to have dispose template. Which is fine. I mean, it's better to add it than not adding it, because that will push you in the direction of always adding it instead of. But yeah, you don't need to use dispose template if you're inheriting from GTK box, because GTK box dispose implementation will automatically unparent every direct child. So I would have to modify the example here to actually use GTK widget. Hi, Elatira. But yeah, let's just ignore it. Here doesn't matter. And then you can also use GTK widget class bind template callback to connect the signal callback defined in the template with a function visible in the scope of the class. Which is technically true. But the visibility situation here is interesting. I'd have to check if it still is the case on Windows. It should work, but the way the entire callback situation works is yeah, it's not super great. It's not, yeah, it's because we are basically just finding symbols inside the binary and then basically just getting the pointer to the symbol, which is fine for something that you're building yourself. But on Windows, for instance, the visibility rules and a couple of other things in how symbols are exported or visible to the linker or to the shared library itself can get a little bit tricky. So yeah, you will notice that bind template callback isn't heavily used, even in C. It's used, but I think most people connect to signals directly. At least I've seen people do that. So let's make an example. How does this work? Let's see. Using a template. let's move this here. In order to use a template, you will need to register at class initialization. British English versus American English spelling. Class initialization time. Ah. Typically, you will have your UI definition file bundled with your binary using the resource. And here we have to go to the G resource documentation. In order to reliably access it from your application, well, from your project. I'm loath to use the application example here because templates can be used by libraries. GTK uses them. Most of the composite widgets that you've seen provided by GTK itself are actually templates. They are not built-in code. They are described using UI definition files and that get bundled into the shared library itself. So I'm going to use code tabs, but I'm probably gonna start by only writing the C code for this, because the Python version will have to be different. Well, every single language will have to be different. Every single language binding has its own way of using templates, of describing templates. Python has decorators in order to bind stuff to the class, and like has additional methods for getting a template child and attaching it to as an instance, well, a class field. And then Rust has like its own decorators, like its own pragma equivalent. Vala has similar like attributes as Rust. I don't remember. JavaScript has like custom fields inside the class definition. So every single language has its own way of describing templates. Every single language has its own way of taking a class and then augmenting that information with the UI definition file and the template stuff. The main issue is that every language will have its own rules about removing stuff from the template. Every single language will have its own specific rules on how to access things. So I will have to probably use actual complex tabs instead of having code tabs there. So I will have to use something like this instead of using a code tab. Yeah, just Yeah. Yeah, I cannot use code tab. A code tab in Sphinx is a tab that only contains code. So it automatically does the syntax highlighting and will take the name of the language you use and turn it into like the equivalent name there of the tab. But since I will have to add text that is not just code, I will have to use a tab. And in that case, I have to use the name of the tab is the language name, but also it doesn't affect the syntax highlighting. I will have to add an actual code block there. So I'll have to do something like this, code block here, like this. So in C, yeah. So this is a tutorial that is not like the getting started tutorial, but it's going to be kind of similar. So we probably want to have specific step-by-step instruction. So if I do it like this, it's going to be add the template registration with your class init. Not code tab, code block. I just said it. Jesus. Sample init. We also probably want to have something like this. What the heck? G define type sample widget GTK type widget, and then we want struct widget. And then we will have yeah, let's put entry. There we go. Yeah. Oh, we could do something like this. G declare final type sample widget sample widget TWIG. There we go. Yeah, this would be the inside the header, and this would be inside the source code. And we go for a final type because then we don't have to deal with the private data structure and blah blah blah. It gets too complicated and too deep into the woods of how do you subclass a GTK widget. It's kind of pointless. We're trying to describe how to add a widget, add a template to a widget, not how to subclass GTK widget. Subclassing GTK widget is its own kind of worms, so I'm not gonna go too deep into that. Okay, so that class set template. Where are you now? There we go. Ugh, what the heck? Okay, we want to highlight these lines. So we're gonna do something simple. Okay. So it's gonna be line 18 and 19. Now I have to remember emphasize lines. Okay. So we want these two lines here to be emphasized when rendering the code block. Okay. We have a widget type that contains two children entry. Its UI definition file is going to be and yeah, we are gonna have to write down the actual XML. So it's going to be where are you now? Version 0 and encoding GTK, and then it's going to be example widget. And then it's going to be a GTK entry. And it's going to be a button. Yeah, we have to define the XML as well. Otherwise, we are not gonna get out of it alive. The nice bit is that the XML can be identical for every single language, so we don't have to care about that particularly. Okay. And it is going to be saved as a resource under the example widget UI. Okay. So before we go too deep into the woods here, let's see if it actually builds without any warning. I don't believe it will, but it's fine. Oh, it actually worked. Good. I didn't make any glaring error there. Okay. So this is going to be the second step. The second step is going to be adding, binding the children defined in the UI definition file into the instance data structure, so that we can access them directly. Find the widgets defined inside XML template file to the members, the corresponding members of the widgets instance data structure. So it's going to be here code block we're gonna copy this and then we are gonna add here GTK widget plus find template child GTK widget plus find template child. It's gonna be example. On the technical level, this is a little bit of C wizardry that is, it's actually pretty funny to deal with. Like the implementation is interesting. This here is not a function; it's a macro in C. It's a C preprocessor macro. The way that it works is that it will take this structure here and the entry field here, and it will use C madness to compute the offset of the field inside the structure. So there are operators in C that basically will tell you if I have a type and I have a field member of that structure type, can you give me, can the compiler, well, the compiler will not do anything, but whenever the compiler finds this instruction here, will say, okay, this bit is going to be replaced by the offset of that field inside that structure. So we have an offset now, and basically we store that offset from the start of the structure type into private data for GTK widget, and that offset will be then used to access the field using math, basically. So we once we instantiate the entire structure and we know where the structure starts, we take that offset and then we access the field at that offset. It's not field, it's memory. It's C, so it's just a blob of memory. And then you basically say, okay, at this amount of bytes inside that memory area, there is, you can call it this a field, and I can access that field. And it's hilarious that it works. It's hilarious to me. I mean, I've been programming in C for the past, oh god, 23 years. And it's still hilarious to me how this entire house of cards still works. And by still works, I mean the entirety of the world's technological stack hasn't like gone up in flame completely, and we haven't reverted to like agriculture as a species. So it's still funny to me. Okay, so we want to emphasize this line. So it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's gonna be 9 and 10. 9, 10. No, 1, 2, 9. Here. Initialize the template. Children when initializing the instance. So it's going to be code block same. Indicate widget self. It is now possible to access self entry and self and we want to emphasize this line here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's build it again. So I have this here. We add source tutorials, widget templates. We commit it. Tutorials. Add widget template. The composite widget tutorial was a widget docs in the GTK API reference are not a good tutorial, so let's provide something better. And then we have to commit source tutorials, no, source tutorials RST. Link the widget. And then we open a merge request. It's going to be a draft anyway, but it's going to be useful. And then we are going to have this one here. We are going to mark this as a draft. I don't want to accidentally merge it before it's ready. You also see, I want to use this as a way to render the content here. In theory, I could use Sphinx to basically serve this file as a local web service, but web server, but I don't want to. It's annoying. I have to remember where to point my web browser at, and yeah, it's not fun. But I actually should copy the same approach for GI.docgen, really. The main problem of testing GI.docgen is that right now I literally have to generate the file, and then I have to upload them somewhere, because GI.docgen uses a bunch of JavaScript and loads the index.json file as an HTTP request, and web browsers do not let you do that locally for security reasons. So I will have to add like a small web server that loops over and basically lets you test the generated API reference using GI.docgen. So let's see here. Browse to build artifacts, documentation, tutorials. It's not. Yeah, this one. Okay, use a template. The render is correct. Okay. I always forget. It would be nice if GNOME Builder had a restructured text render, just like it has a Markdown render. It would be nice to have one. We can. This doesn't matter. I mean, the main problem of doing a restructured text render for GNOME Builder is that it would need to be a Python plugin, because Python has the. I mean, I'm rendering right now restructured text that is very specific, because it has very Sphinx specific, because it has Sphinx extensions like the tab extension here. So it's not enough just to have a restructured text renderer. It would need to be a Sphinx renderer. So essentially instantiate Sphinx, run it over, and then serve it, which is a much more complicated plugin than just rendering Markdown as HTML and then rendering the HTML. It would be possible to use it. It would be fairly. It wouldn't be fairly easy, but it would be possible to have it. So basically, you create a plugin that runs Sphinx on the current project, and you basically ask it to render it, and then you open up a tab inside GNOME Builder that is pointed to a local web service that runs the build and shows it to you. So it would be just integrating what Sphinx already does, but you wouldn't need to use the terminal to do it, and also or a separate web browser to do it. It would be also interesting to have some ways of defining the build here, so you can just press play here and it opens up a web view here. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting integration point. I'll have to experiment a little bit. Of course, right now experimenting is kind of pointless. GNOME Builder is getting ported to GTK 4, which means that the internal plugin API is completely shot. I know that Christian and other people are porting the internal plugins that GNOME Builder ships to C, and I'll have to wait at the very least another cycle before I can work on an actual plugin that does this. But it would be interesting to have it. It would be an interesting extension to what GNOME Builder already provides. Okay. Dispose. Clear the template children when disposing the widget instance. So it's going to be code block C static void example widget dispose. So GTK widget dispose template. And this is going to be example type widget class sample widget class dispose. So just to explain a little bit here, because this is new. So you see here, GTK widget init template only takes the widget instance, and GTK widget dispose template instead takes a G type here. Why is that necessary? The reason why is necessary is because GObject dispose, so the dispose implement virtual function, is part of the GObject, which means that is something that the type system knows nothing about. Whereas the instance init function is part of the type system. Whenever you register a type, you have to specify the class initialization function and the instance initialization function. Notice nothing else. No class finalization function. No instance finalization function. Nothing else. Everything that deals with disposal and finalization of a GObject type, of the GObject class, is part of GObject. It's not part of the type system. There is another gotcha that not many people know about. Inside the instance initialization function, you will get a pointer here to the instance you're initializing, and the type of that instance will be the type that you're currently initializing. So let's assume that I derived example widget here and I made example widget 2. Inside example widget init, I would get an instance that is of type example widget, not example widget 2, and so on and so forth. So if I'm inside, I don't know, GTK widget, the GTK widget pointer that I get would have a type of GTK widget. Even though I'm, for instance, instantiating GTK file chooser dialog. So something that is very down in the hierarchy, very at the bottom of the hierarchy. Sorry, not the bottom. Well, yeah, the bottom of the hierarchy, if we conceptualize GTK widget as the top of the hierarchy. So again, I could not, inside an instance init, I would not be able to do, for instance, if example is deeply derived widget here. So you cannot violate the list of the list of principles. A parent class cannot check for if the type that is instantiating or initializing is a derived type, because the G type of this pointer here will be example widget. It will not be the actual type. This means that inside GTK widget init template, if GTK does please give me your object type, it will be the type that I'm currently initializing. This does not happen in dispose. Inside, since dispose is part of GObject, the type is not tweaked, is not changed there. So we need to be explicit and specify that we are disposing the children, the template children, of this type and this type only. Because if I add like static void example deeply derived widget dispose, and I did GTK widget dispose template here, the G type of this object here, the would be extremely derived, deeply derived widget. And then I chain up to the parent implementation, and I get into example widget dispose. And then I do, please give me the type of this object, and it would be extremely deeply derived widget here. Which means that I would remove the template children for the exact same type, instead of removing only the widgets that are the template children that I defined for this type. So this is why there is this little discrepancy, this little asymmetry between init template and dispose template. It's because init template can take advantage of the fact that the instance initialization function is always strictly operating on the type that is currently initializing by a trick performed by the type system itself. Whereas the dispose implementation always operates on the type of the instance, regardless of the level in which we are. Otherwise, you would see something like this, like G object class example widget parent class init. Here. Otherwise, you would see this. You will see a chain up to the parent implementation. The reason why you don't have it to chain up is because the type system will do it for you, but in order to do that, it will have to it will have to tweak the instance here to ensure that you're only initializing the type that you are actually accessing, instead of initializing the real type of your instance. So it would allow you to have access to additional fields. Widget class init. Let's copy this. Let's copy all the bits here. So we can emphasize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we emphasize line 10, 11, 12. Yeah, this bit of the type system tricks a lot of people, actually, because people will say, okay, I have this derived type, and I want to do some. I want to be nasty. I want to be I want to be bad, and I will have a generic type at the top, and then I have like derived types, but then I want to do the generic bit of code at the top to do something specific for this type, this derived type, or this derived type, and then they do that inside the instance init function, and they realize, hey, the type check doesn't work. The type check works perfectly fine. It doesn't do what you think it does. There is a way to access the actual type that you are initializing, but it requires not using the gdefine type macros. So if you really want to be bad, if you want to be to violate the rules, then you get to write the entirety of the boilerplate code that we conveniently remove using macros. You want to work against the type system? Then you get to experience the full type system in your face. Okay, so right, there isn't much else to do, honestly, about like templates. There isn't much else. How to initialize them, how to dispose of them, how to access them, and stuff like that. It is not necessary to bind all the template children defined in the UI. You can use a widget get template child to access named template child at run. It is more efficient to, well, if you find yourself accessing the same child, same template child multiple times, it is more efficient to store the reference inside your instance data structure. What else? What else? Maybe as a note. Not as a actual paragraph. It's kind of a like a remark. It's not really I mean, as a feature is that not many people like use it out of the box because not many people understand how to deal with like subclassing GTK widgets and creating their own composite like types. But it doesn't necessarily need to be complicated or extra long. It's like, I'm not gonna say it's basic functionality because it's not like immediately obvious that you can do this, which is why I'm writing a simple tutorial. But the overall idea is that this should be basic functionality for anything that is more complicated than a very simple test or a very simple like thrown together UI written in Python to do a single job and then chucked away, the equivalent of a shell script. If you're writing anything more complicated than that, then definitely use templates and definitely derive widgets because it makes maintaining your application a lot easier. So yeah, maybe I should actually add a section here. When to use templates. templates for composite widgets could be used for any how do I explain this in a way that doesn't make me cringe and also doesn't violate basically every single grammar rule in English. Useful to as a way to keep code and reduce the size of UI definition files. If your UI definitions become increasingly complex or include too many levels of nested widgets, and then you should consider moving lots of functionality and related widgets into their own composite template. And then instantiate the template widget inside instantiate template widget from their UI definition for instance code block XML. If we have object class box child, then we have object class box again, then we have child, then we have object class GTK stack, then we have again object class GTK stack page property name child box okay, so we have a deeply nested example here. For instance, given this UI definition, you may want to move the GTK box that is the child of the stack page into its own composite widget. So we copy this. Then we call it object class. Let's call it buttons page. So we call it here. Template. And here buttons page. And then reference it from the main live information. After that, you may want to move the box with the stack into its own composite widget. I copy it again. Stack box. And reference it. Well, object plus box. We have replaced one big UI definition file with 3 smaller ones. Which is also another thing that people ask about GTK Builder inside the GTK like chat. How can I do like X include, or how can I include other like bits of XML into my my main Windows XML UI definition file? And the answer is you can't do that. You cannot do that unless you basically have your own way of doing X include, and then you pre-process the UI definition files and generate a single one, a single big one. Instead, you should switch to composite templates. You should do this. It basically replaces including XML inside other XML with having specific subclasses. it's a lot simpler to conceptualize this kind of operation. You're basically just doing object-oriented programming with XML. You're, instead of having a massive single file with a massive single class, you have multiple files with smaller subclasses that you then composite together. So I guess one of the main, like, people that usually ask for this kind of behavior, so being able to include other XML inside the UI definition file, are usually thinking about GUI development as they would about like shell scripting or very imperative programming. They usually don't conceptualize the object-oriented part of GTK just because it's C, so they have troubles with that. Subclassing is fine. You should really learn how to subclass objects when dealing with GTK and any other GObject-based library. It's part of the thing. It's how the thing works. So I don't understand why you should ignore it. Source, tutorials, widget templates, and then we commit again, then we push. I understand people being scared about object orientation in C, and I understand people having like doubts about how GObject works, because GObject is kind of it's kind of weird as a framework. It's adding object orientation to C is kind of weird, doesn't fit inside the syntax of the language. It has to be built on top of that. But once you are confronted with the fact that any like GTK, like any other GObject-based library, is based on object orientation, you also have to come to terms with the fact that you will have to subclass stuff. I'll have to update the CI pipeline to use Fedora 36 instead of Fedora 35. Okay, Java succeeded. Let's go. Yeah, sometimes this happens. The CSS gets not loaded. Come on. Okay. Okay. Yeah, as a first iteration over the topic, I think it's a good enough approximation. I mean, we can add more. We can always add more, of course, but as a simple way of like describing what templates and composite templates are, how to set them up, how to access stuff, and then when to use them. It's kind of a pretty simple approach. Um, I don't know, adding more stuff there kind of feels like too much. Um, the adding callbacks probably will need its own stuff, but that case, yeah, I'm always kind of scared about callbacks because different language bindings will have their differences there. This subset here is what works for every language that has composite template support. When it comes to callbacks, is a little bit... I'll have to figure something out there. Yeah, this is a good place to like merge everything. So let's yeah, let's close this, and then we do git rebase origin main splash. Okie dokie. And we unmark it as a draft, and we merge it when the pipeline succeeds. And then we are going to add the Python version as soon as I figure out how to deal with the unparenting of widgets, which is not going to be anytime soon. Yeah, the Python situation is kind of annoying, and there's not much we can do about it. It's one of the biggest limitations inside Python at the moment. I mean, Python and GTK 4 are kind of, they work for like any basic usage. You can write applications in Python and GTK 4 and debug Wita, and it's going to be fine. The main problem is that you have two issues that are kind of not blockers, because of course they're not blockers, but they make your code less ergonomic and less idiomatic than it should be. The first one is composite templates. Templates work, but you have to subclass a container that will dispose of its widget of its children by default, which means it has to be done in C. Because Python doesn't give you access to the dispose virtual function of GObject, which means you cannot call GTK widget dispose template, and you cannot, if you're using an older version of GTK, you cannot use unparent yourself inside the dispose implementation, which means you will get warnings whenever the widget goes away, gets destroyed. And the other thing you cannot do in Python is accessing typed instances. So stuff that can be derived, that is an object, that is a type, that is a typed instance, but is not a G object. So you cannot access GTK expression and you cannot access GTK event. You can only create, well, GTK event is not that big of a deal. You shouldn't be using events this day and age, except for very specific stuff. And in that case, using Python is probably not a good plan to begin with. But the expressions, you can work around it by defining them inside your UI definition file. So you can define expressions inside the UI definition file, but you cannot access them from Python. So you cannot get a GTK expression reference, do your own thing, and then discard it. Or you cannot create your own expression in code and then put inside another widget that uses expressions like GTK list view or the filter models and stuff like that. You can only do that from UI definition files, which is a shame because Python is still a fairly good language to write UI applications in, especially smaller applications that are not going to be super complicated. They are easy to maintain, especially with the new type system inside Python. It's kind of interesting to increase maintainability as well. So, I mean, Python is getting interesting for some stuff in the GUI space, especially for large applications, but the PyG object maintenance status is kind of holding us back a little bit. It would be nice if more people contributed to PyG object. But hey, I mean, we cannot force anybody to pick up maintenance of a project anyway, so. And I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Python used to be the language of choice for a lot of applications and a lot of middleware for like Linux distributions and stuff like that back in the noughties, so early 2000s. But I think it has lost a little bit of like market in that area, that niche. It's still very much used for like smaller applications that are used in-house, probably like for very specific tasks. At which point using GTK is perfectly fine. GTK 4 even, and libad white is perfectly fine. The maintenance angle is not going to be hugely relevant. I know, it always feels that a lot of people working GUIs these days are working on web and Electron and that kind of stuff, and it's kind of disappointing. It's also reflected by the fact that the Python packaging story for anything that is not a Python module or a Python command line tool is just awful. It's just not there. It's basically terrible. And even for command line tools is kind of iffy at best. And there is no interest from the Python community to actually fix this. Just it's almost like all the people working on Python are still basically just writing libraries. And everyone else is not packaging anything. It's not, sorry, not packaging. It's not like building anything else. Okay. There you go. Good stuff. So yeah, that was pretty good. Oh, yeah, I guess we're gonna do a shorter stream. Well, shorter streams like 2 hours 16 minutes. Okay, but yeah, it's I'm coming back to streaming more regularly after the whole July of hiatus. Um, but yeah, hopefully it will be a little bit a little bit better, a little more regular. And now that the weather allows me to actually do this without melting in a puddle over the floor. But yeah, I'll probably still like work a little bit on the documentation side of things because we still need a lot of documentation. And I'll go back to Amberall as well because I have a couple of things that I still want to work on. So probably I'll work on Amberall on Wednesday. So yeah, I'll do a Wednesday stream with more hacking on Amberall, like looking at the merge requests on fuzzy search and the um, replay gain. And I also want to finish the marquee label widget that allows me to like scroll the labels that are too long so I don't have to ellipsize their contents. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday at this point. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully we'll be fine. The weather will not like completely make this untenable. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the stream, and I hope to see you all again on Wednesday for more of this. I'll have to change the chat here. It's a little bit meh. It's too dark. Anyway, I was experimenting a little bit with the settings to avoid having this like weird blob on the side, but we'll see what happens there. I'll have to tweak a little bit of things. Also, my connection seems to be being stable enough for me to stream without any problem, which great. I hope it works this way again. But yeah, so I guess I shall see you all on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your Monday. Have a great rest of your day if you're in an appropriate time zone. Otherwise, have a great night. And yeah, I'll try to upload the VOD of this stream a little bit quicker this time. I have a pile of VODs, but most of them are kind of me like just messing around, so I'm not entirely sure I'll upload all of them. We'll see what happens. But yeah, have fun, and I shall see you all again on Wednesday. Bye.